"Don't look between my legs," she whispered, trembling with shame and fear. But Silas Cordell wasn't a man who followed warnings when it came to the woman he craved, when he defied her, when his calloused hands touched the secret she'd hidden for years, when he looked at what made her believe she was cursed. He didn't just accept it. He claimed it. "This belongs to me now," he growled, his lips against her skin. "Every inch of you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you're worth everything." This is the story of forbidden desire, of a widow too tall and too marked to be loved, and the cowboy who taught her that the right man doesn't just see your scars, he worships them. But to understand how Silas Cordell came to kneel in the dust beside Temperance Blackwood, his hand claiming what she'd hidden in terror, you need to know how a woman accused of murder ended up dying on a Montana road with secrets carved into her flesh. 3 days earlier, Temperance had been dragged from her home by men wearing masks in fury. Her husband Josiah was dead, found with his skull caved in behind their barn, and the town of Miller's Creek wanted blood. "She killed him," they screamed. "The giant killed her own husband." They didn't care that Josiah had beaten her for 5 years. They didn't care about the bruises she hid under long sleeves or the way she flinched when men raised their voices. All they saw was a woman too tall, too strong, too different. A woman who could have done it, so they threw her out with nothing but the clothes on her back and a warning burned into her mind. "If we see you again, we'll hang you properly." For 3 days, Temperance walked the Montana wilderness alone. No food, no water, no hope. Her right leg, injured when they'd thrown her down the courthouse steps, screamed with every step. By the 3rd day, infection had set in. The flesh around her knee was hot and swollen, red streaks climbing toward her thigh. She knew what that meant. She'd seen men die from infected wounds before. When her leg finally gave out on that dusty road 15 miles from anywhere, Temperance Blackwood didn't cry. She just lay there in the dirt, staring up at the endless blue sky, and felt something like relief. At least it would be over. At least she wouldn't have to carry the weight of being unwanted, unloved, and accused anymore. At least death would be kinder than the town that birthed her. That's when she heard the horse. Temperance tried to push herself up, panic flooding her veins. If it was men from town, they'd finish what infection started. But her leg wouldn't hold her. She collapsed back down with a cry of pain that echoed across the empty prairie. The rider came closer. Through the dust and her fading vision, she could make out a figure, tall in the saddle, wearing a battered hat and a coat that had seen better days. A man. Of course it was a man. Men had destroyed her life. Men had beaten her, accused her, cast her out. And now a man would be the last thing she'd see. "Don't come closer," she gasped, trying to sound threatening even as her voice shook. "I'm armed." She wasn't. She had nothing. But maybe the lie would buy her a merciful bullet instead of something worse. The man dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He moved carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and surprisingly gentle. "I'm not here to hurt you. Looks like you're already hurt enough." Silas Cordell had been riding toward the Wyoming border, running from his own demons, when he spotted the figure collapsed in the road. He'd almost kept going. Almost. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the way she was lying there, so still and yet so defiant. Maybe it was the echo of his own desperation he recognized in her posture. Or maybe it was just that he was tired of running from everything, including his own conscience. When he got close enough to see her clearly, Silas felt his breath catch. She was massive. Not fat, but tall and powerfully built, with shoulders that could probably lift a grown man and hands scarred from hard labor. Her face was beautiful in a raw, unpolished way. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that burned with equal parts fear and fury. But it was the blood seeping through her skirt at the knee that made him move faster. "Your leg's infected," he said, kneeling beside her. "Badly. You need help." "I don't need anything from you," Temperance spat, trying to pull away. But the movement sent agony shooting up her thigh, and she gasped, tears springing to her eyes against her will. Silas reached for her leg, and that's when she said it. "Don't look between my legs." The words came out strangled, desperate. "Please, just leave me here. Let me die with some dignity." But Silas Cordell had spent the last 3 years learning that dignity didn't save lives. Action did. His hands moved to the hem of her skirt, and she tried to push him away, trembling with shame and fear. "Stop," she begged. "You don't understand. There's something. I'm marked. I'm cursed. Please don't look." He looked anyway, and what he saw made everything else make terrible sense. Silas pulled back the torn fabric of her skirt, ignoring her whimpers of protest, and saw the infection first. The wound around her knee was angry and weeping, the kind that killed if left untreated. But as his eyes traveled up her leg, he saw something else. Something that made his jaw tighten with rage at whoever had made this woman believe she needed to hide. A birthmark, large and dark, spreading across her inner thigh like spilled wine. Port wine stain, his mother would have called it, just skin. Just a mark some people were born with, nothing evil, nothing cursed, nothing that should make a woman beg a stranger not to look at her. But carved into the skin around that birthmark, barely healed and clearly done with a crude blade, were words. Letters cut deep enough to scar permanently. Silas leaned closer, his hands steady even as fury built in his chest, and read what someone had carved into Temperance Blackwood's flesh. Devil's mark. Killer. Cursed. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "Now you see," she choked out. "Now you know what I am, what they said I am. Just leave me, please. I don't want you to see this. I don't want anyone to ever see this again." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Temperance never expected. He placed his hand directly over those carved words, his palm warm against her fevered skin, covering the cruelty with his own flesh. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Who did this to you?" "My husband," she whispered. "Before they killed him, or before I killed him. I don't even know anymore. They say I did it. The whole town says I murdered him because I'm a giant, and I'm marked and I'm unnatural. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm cursed." "You're not cursed," Silas said, and the certainty in his voice made her eyes snap to his face. "You're scarred. There's a difference. Scars mean you survived something that tried to destroy you." He pulled back his collar, revealing the rope burn that wrapped around his neck like a noose that hadn't quite finished its job. "I got this 3 years ago in Texas. They said I stole horses. I didn't. But 5 men decided I looked guilty enough to hang anyway. I cut myself free, but not before the rope burned through to bone. You know what I learned dangling from that tree branch?" Temperance shook her head, unable to speak. "I learned that people are real quick to mark what they're afraid of, to name it evil so they don't have to face their own darkness. Your husband carved these words into you because he was terrified of what you represented. A woman stronger than him, a woman he couldn't break no matter how hard he tried, so he tried to make you believe you were the monster instead of him." "You don't know what I did," Temperance said, but her voice was wavering. "You don't know if I killed him?" "Did you?" Silas asked simply. The question hung in the air between them. Temperance closed her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know. He was beating me that night. Worse than usual. Said the mark on my leg was spreading, that the devil was claiming more of me. He had the knife. He'd already carved killer into my skin. I was screaming. We were struggling. And then he was on the ground and his head was bleeding and he wasn't moving. There was a rock in my hand. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember hitting him, but he was dead, and I was holding the rock, and the whole town heard me screaming." "So you defended yourself," Silas said. "That's not murder. That's survival. The law doesn't see it that way, not when you're a woman like me." Silas looked down at her infected leg, at the cruel words carved into her flesh, at this woman who'd been beaten and branded and cast out to die alone, and he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "The law can go to hell," he said. "I'm not leaving you here to die." "Why?" Temperance demanded, and now there was anger in her voice. Anger felt safer than hope. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I'm accused of murder. I'm marked. I'm cursed. Every decent person in Miller's Creek said so." Silas leaned closer, his hand still covering those hateful carved words, and his eyes burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm not decent people," he said. "I'm a man who was nearly lynched for a crime he didn't commit. I'm a drifter with nothing but a horse and a past full of ghosts. And I'm looking at a woman who survived 5 years of hell and still had the strength to fight back when it mattered. You're not cursed, Temperance. You're the strongest damn person I've ever met." Before she could respond, before she could build her walls back up, Silas moved his hand from the carved words to the birthmark itself. His fingers traced the edge of that port wine stain with surprising gentleness. "This mark," he said, "this is just skin, beautiful skin on a beautiful woman. And these words?" His thumb brushed over the scarred letters. "These are lies carved by a coward who couldn't handle what you are." "And what am I?" she whispered. Silas met her eyes, and what she saw there made her heart stutter in her chest. Want, raw, undeniable want. Not the cruel hunger her husband had shown, but something different, something that looked almost like reverence. "You're mine now," he said, his voice dropping to a growl that she felt in her bones. "If you'll have me. This mark, these scars, this strong, beautiful body they tried to make you hate, all of it belongs to me now, and I'm going to spend every day proving to you that you're worth everything." Temperance wanted to laugh, wanted to tell him he was insane, but the way his hand rested on her thigh, claiming what she'd hidden in shame, the way his eyes held hers without flinching, it made something crack open inside her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "You don't know what you're saying," she managed. "You'll change your mind when—" "I won't," Silas interrupted. "I don't change my mind once it's made up. Now, we can argue about this after I've saved your life. But right now, that infection is going to kill you if we don't treat it, so I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Could she? Could she trust a stranger who'd looked at her worst shame and called it beautiful? Could she trust a man who claimed her scars like they were treasures? Every instinct screamed no. But as the fever pulled at her consciousness and the pain in her leg intensified, Temperance realized she didn't have a choice. It was trust this cowboy or die alone in the dirt, and suddenly, dying felt like letting Josiah win. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you." Silas nodded once, then scooped her up into his arms like she weighed nothing. Temperance gasped, not from pain but from shock. Men didn't carry her. Men couldn't carry her. She was too big, too tall, too heavy. But Silas lifted her easily, his arms solid and sure beneath her, and carried her to his horse like she was something precious. As he settled her in the saddle and mounted behind her, his arms coming around to hold her steady, Temperance felt tears sliding down her face. Not from pain this time, from something far more dangerous, from the terrifying, impossible feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about everything. Silas found an abandoned trapper's cabin 6 miles north, half hidden in a stand of pine trees where the wind didn't cut quite so sharp. The roof leaked in 2 places and the door hung crooked on its hinges, but it had 4 walls and a stone fireplace that still worked. More importantly, it had distance from Miller's Creek and the men who wanted Temperance dead. He carried her inside and laid her on the single bed frame, its mattress long since rotted away. He spread his bedroll over the wooden slats instead, then went to work gathering firewood and water from the creek. Temperance drifted in and out of consciousness, the fever pulling her under like a riptide. She was aware of Silas moving around the cabin, of the fire crackling to life, of his hands gentle but firm as he cut away more of her skirt to expose the infected wound fully. "This is going to hurt," he said quietly, and she appreciated that he didn't lie to her. "Infection's deep. I need to clean it out properly or it'll spread to your blood. You'll want to scream. Go ahead and scream. Nobody out here but us in the trees." He heated his knife in the fire until the blade glowed red, then poured whiskey over it. Temperance watched through fever-glazed eyes, understanding what was coming. When the hot blade touched her infected flesh, cutting away the poisoned tissue, she did scream. Screamed until her throat was raw and tears poured down her face. But Silas's hand never wavered. He worked with the focused precision of a man who'd treated wounds before, who knew that mercy sometimes meant causing pain to prevent death. When he finally finished, wrapping her leg in clean cloth torn from his own spare shirt, Temperance was shaking violently. Silas pulled a blanket over her, then did something unexpected. He climbed onto the narrow bed beside her and pulled her against his chest, wrapping his body around hers. "You need warmth," he said when she tensed. "Fever's trying to burn you up from the inside. My body heat will help regulate yours. That's all this is." But it wasn't all it was, and they both knew it. Temperance hadn't been held gently since before she could remember, hadn't felt safe in a man's arms maybe ever. Yet here she was, her back pressed against Silas Cordell's chest, his heartbeat steady against her spine, his breath warm on her neck, and for the first time in 3 days, maybe 3 years, she felt like she might actually survive. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered into the darkness. "Really, men don't help women like me without wanting something." Silas was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Then his arm tightened around her waist, careful of her injuries. "You want the truth?" "Always?" "I saw you lying in that road and I saw myself. 3 years ago, after they cut me down from that hanging tree, I collapsed on a riverbank in Texas. Infected rope burn, broken ribs, nowhere to go. I lay there thinking about how much easier it would be to just slip under the water and stop fighting. Then an old Comanche woman found me. She didn't speak English and I didn't speak Comanche, but she dragged me back to her camp anyway, treated my wounds, fed me, saved my life, even though her people had every reason to hate white men after what we'd done to them. He paused, his thumb tracing small circles on her hip through the blanket. Before she sent me on my way, she said something through gestures I finally understood. She pointed at my rope scar, then at her heart, then at me. Took me days to figure out what she meant. She was saying that surviving doesn't make you cursed, it makes you chosen. Chosen to live when death wanted you. Chosen to carry on when quitting would be easier. When I saw you in that road, I saw someone chosen, someone who survived what should have killed her, and I couldn't ride past that. Temperance felt fresh tears sliding down her face, but these were different from the pain tears. These came from somewhere deeper, somewhere she'd locked away tight after years of cruelty. I don't feel chosen, she admitted. I feel broken. Broken things can be mended, Silas said, if someone cares enough to do the mending. And you care? About a woman you met yesterday? A woman accused of murder? His lips brushed against her ear when he spoke, and the intimacy of it made her shiver for reasons that had nothing to do with fever. I'm starting to, yes, more than starting to if I'm honest. There's something about you, Temperance Blackwood, something that called to me the moment I saw you. Like, recognizes, like, maybe, broken calls to broken? Or maybe I just finally found something worth staying still for instead of always running. The fever broke sometime in the night. Temperance woke to gray dawn light filtering through the cabin's cracks, and Silas's arm still wrapped around her waist. Her leg throbbed, but the sharp, poisonous edge of the infection had dulled. She could think clearly for the first time in days, and her first clear thought was how right it felt to be held by this man. How safe. How terrifyingly, impossibly safe. She shifted slightly, testing her mobility, and Silas woke instantly. Easy, he murmured. Don't move too fast. How's the leg? Better, she said, and was surprised to find it was true. Still hurts, but different. Cleaner. Good, that's good. But he didn't move his arm, didn't pull away, just held her there in the quiet morning, and Temperance realized he was giving her a choice. She could pull away, could rebuild her walls, could pretend this intimacy never happened, or she could stay, could lean into this feeling, could let herself want something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. She stayed. They lay there as the sun rose higher, neither speaking, both thinking. Finally, Temperance broke the silence. Those men from Miller's Creek. They'll come looking eventually. They'll want to make sure I'm dead. And if they find you, help me. Let them come, Silas said, and there was steel in his voice now. I've been running for 3 years. Maybe it's time I stood my ground. You can't fight a whole town. Watch me. Temperance turned in his arms, ignoring the protest from her leg until she could see his face. Really see him. He had good features, strong jaw, straight nose, eyes that were more gray than blue, but it was the scar that defined him, that rope burn that marked him as a survivor just like her. She reached up and traced it with one finger, feeling the raised, tortured flesh. Does it still hurt? Sometimes, he admitted, when it rains or gets cold, mostly it just reminds me that I'm still alive when I shouldn't be. Same, she whispered, and moved her hand to rest over her own heart. Everything hurts, but I'm still here. You are, Silas agreed. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt on her cheek. And I'm going to make sure you stay here. No more running, no more hiding. We find a place far from Miller's Creek, somewhere they can't reach us, and we build something. Together. You don't even know me, Temperance protested, but her voice was weak. She wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. Then let me know you, Silas said simply. We've got time. We've got this cabin. We've got each other. Let me learn every part of you, Temperance. The parts you think are beautiful and the parts you think are cursed. Let me prove to you that all of it, every single inch, is worth protecting. And there, in that broken-down cabin with the morning light streaming through the cracks, Temperance Blackwood made a choice. She leaned forward and kissed Silas Cordell, not passionately, not desperately, but softly, tentatively, like someone testing whether something fragile could actually hold weight. And when he kissed her back with the same careful tenderness, when his hand cradled the back of her head like she was something precious, she felt that crack in her chest widen further, felt hope flooding in like water through a broken dam. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Silas rested his forehead against hers. We should probably talk about what happens next, he said. Practical things, where we go, how we survive. Later, Temperance said, surprising herself. Right now, just hold me. Please. I haven't been held like this in so long. Maybe never. Just let me have this moment before reality comes back. So Silas held her as the sun climbed higher, held her as her body slowly healed, held her like she was the most valuable thing in all of Montana Territory. And Temperance let herself be held, let herself believe, for just a little while, that maybe she could have this, maybe she could have him. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and coming rain. And 8 miles south, in Miller's Creek, 5 men were saddling their horses and loading their rifles, determined to finish what they'd started. Because the town couldn't rest easy, knowing the giant woman who'd killed one of their own was still breathing somewhere out there. They were coming. Death was coming. But for now, in this moment, Temperance Blackwood felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt alive. They had 5 days of peace before the riders came. 5 days where Silas hunted and Temperance's legs slowly healed. 5 days where they learned each other in the quiet spaces between survival tasks. She told him about growing up too tall, too different, watching other girls get courted while men looked at her like a curiosity. He told her about losing his family's ranch to debt collectors, about the false accusation that nearly ended his life. They traded scars like currency, each wound a story, each story bringing them closer. On the 6th morning, Silas was checking his snares near the creek when he heard the horses, 8 riders moving fast through the timber. He recognized the lead man immediately, Sheriff Dalton from Miller's Creek, the same man who'd stood by while they threw Temperance out of town. Silas ran back to the cabin, his heart pounding. "They're here," he said, grabbing his rifle. 8 men, maybe 10 minutes behind me." Temperance's face went pale, but she pulled herself up from the bed, testing her weight on the injured leg. It held barely. "You should go," she said quietly. "Right out the back. They don't know you're involved. You can still get away clean." "Not happening," Silas said flatly. He was loading his rifle, checking his revolver, his movements quick and efficient. "We face this together or not at all." "Silas, they'll kill you. They'll kill us both." "Maybe." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his eyes were fierce with determination. "Or maybe we make them understand they picked the wrong people to hunt. Maybe we show them what happens when you try to destroy someone who's already survived worse than you can imagine." The sound of hoofbeats was getting closer. Temperance grabbed the old shotgun she'd found in the cabin's corner, the one Silas had cleaned and loaded just in case. Her hands were shaking, but her jaw was set. "If we're doing this," she said, "we do it smart. The cabin's defensible, limited entry points. We make them come to us on our terms." Silas smiled then, fierce and proud. "That's my girl." The riders surrounded the cabin within minutes. Sheriff Dalton's voice rang out, full of false authority. "Temperance Blackwood, we know you're in there. Come out peaceful and we'll make this quick. Fight and we'll burn you out. Either way, you're answering for what you did to Josiah." Silas positioned himself at the window, rifle aimed. "She didn't do anything but defend herself from a man who was beating her to death," he called back. "You want her, you'll have to go through me first." There was a pause. Then Dalton laughed, ugly and mean. "Who the hell are you, stranger? You got no stake in this." "I'm the man who loves her," Silas said simply, and Temperance's breath caught because he said it like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "And I'm the man who's going to put a bullet in anyone who tries to hurt her, so you can turn around and ride back to Miller's Creek, or you can test whether I'm bluffing. Your choice." "There's 8 of us and 2 of you," Dalton countered. "You do the math." "I can count," Silas replied. "Question is, which 2 or 3 of you want to die first? Because I promise you, even if you kill us, we'll take at least half of you with us. Is that worth it? Is killing a woman who was defending herself worth your life?" The men shifted uneasily. This wasn't supposed to be complicated. This was supposed to be simple justice. Find the woman, hang her, go home. Nobody said anything about a gunfight with a man who sounded entirely too calm about his odds. Temperance moved to the other window, shotgun ready. "I didn't murder my husband," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "But I won't pretend I'm sorry he's dead. He spent 5 years beating me, carving hateful words into my flesh, telling me I was cursed because of a birthmark I was born with. The night he died, he was trying to kill me. I fought back, that's all. And if that makes me a murderer in your eyes, then come get me. But Silas is right. Some of you will die first. Are you willing to die for Josiah Blackwood, for a man you all knew was cruel? For a man who beat his wife and called it discipline?" Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then one of the riders, a younger man named Tom, spoke up. "Sheriff, she's got a point. Josiah was mean as a snake. We all knew it. Maybe we shouldn't. Shut up, Tom, Dalton snapped, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. That's when Silas made his move. He'd been watching the men, reading their body language, seeing the doubt creeping in. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice carrying clear and strong. Temperance and I are leaving Montana, heading west to Oregon Territory where nobody knows us and nobody cares about Miller's Creek politics. You'll never see us again. All you have to do is ride away. Tell the town she died from her injuries. Hell, tell them you shot her yourself if it makes you feel better. But let us go, and this ends without bloodshed. What do you say, Sheriff? You want to be the hero who avenged Josiah Blackwood, or do you want to go home to your family tonight? More silence. The tension stretched like wire about to snap. Then Sheriff Dalton said something that surprised everyone. I saw those scars on her legs when we threw her out of town, the words carved into her. I didn't want to see them, but I did. And I knew, right then, that we were making a mistake. But the town was angry, and Josiah's family was screaming for blood, and it was easier to blame the giant woman than admit one of our own was a monster. He spat into the dirt, disgusted with himself. Ride out, he said finally. Both of you. Ride out and don't come back. I'll tell the town you died from infection. But if I ever see your faces in Miller's Creek again, I won't be so merciful. We clear? Crystal, Silas said. The riders turned and left, the sound of their horses fading. Into the distance. Temperance stood frozen, unable to believe it was over, that she was actually free. Silas lowered his rifle and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, all the fear and adrenaline draining out at once, leaving her shaking. It's done, he murmured into her hair. It's over. You're safe now. We're safe, she corrected, pulling back to look at him. You could have died for me today. You should have run. Why didn't you run? Silas cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense. Because I meant what I said out there. I love you, Temperance Blackwood. I've known you less than a week, and I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. You're brave and strong and beautiful, and every part of you, including the parts you think are shameful, is precious to me. Even the mark, she whispered. Even the scars? Especially those, he said fiercely. Those marks are proof you survived, proof you're stronger than anything that tried to break you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life showing you that you're worth everything, worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. Temperance kissed him then, deep and desperate and full of all the words she couldn't say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered against his lips, I love you too. God help me, I do. I didn't think I could ever love again, but you made me believe. Good, Silas said, grinning, because we've got a long ride to Oregon, and I plan to spend every mile proving it. 3 months later, Silas and Temperance stood on a piece of land in the Willamette Valley, looking at the foundation they'd just laid for their new home. The Oregon Territory was beautiful, green and wild and full of possibility. Nobody here knew about Miller's Creek. Nobody asked questions about the tall woman or the man with the rope scar. They were just Silas and Temperance Cordell, homesteaders building a life from scratch. That night, lying in their tent under a sky full of stars, Temperance ran her fingers over the scars on her thigh. The hateful words were still there. They'd never fully fade, but they didn't hurt the same way anymore. Not when Silas kissed them every night like they were holy. Not when he traced those letters with his fingers and whispered how beautiful she was. He'd kept his promise. Every single day he proved she was worth everything. What are you thinking? Silas asked, pulling her closer. That I spent so long believing I was cursed, Temperance said softly. That the mark on my leg meant I was unlovable. That being too tall and too strong made me less than a woman. But you taught me something different. You taught me that the right person doesn't just accept your scars, they worship them. They see your broken places and love you more, not less. Silas kissed her temple, her cheek, her lips. You were never cursed, darling. You were always meant to be mine. We just had to find each other first. I'm glad we did, Temperance whispered. I'm glad you didn't look away when I warned you not to look. I'm glad you claimed what I tried to hide. I'm glad you're stubborn and brave and crazy enough to love someone like me. Someone like you? Silas laughed softly. Temperance, you're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. Loving you isn't crazy. It's the sanest thing I've ever done. They fell asleep tangled together, two scarred survivors who'd found in each other not just love, but healing, not just acceptance, but celebration. The giant widow who'd been cast out had found her home, and the lonely cowboy who'd been running had finally found his reason to stay. In the morning, they'd keep building, keep planting, keep creating a life that proved wrong everyone who'd said they were cursed. But tonight, they just held each other under the Oregon stars and knew they were exactly where they belonged. Together, claimed, loved, worth everything. And that's how a widow who was told to hide herself found a cowboy who taught her to stand tall. That's how shame became pride and scars became badges of honor. Because the right love doesn't fix you. It shows you that you were never broken to begin with. Now we want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this story from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful tale. Because every person deserves to know they're worth everything, including you. The end.